So welcome. I'm Seth Dellinger. This is the first workshop for the brand new Musicality of Being membership, which is going to be offered via Substack. Most likely you heard about this Zoom call today via Substack, and I'm going to be doing one of these each month. And there's going to be all kinds of other features that are available for people who decide to sign up for a paid subscription. And you know, this is to give you a little preview of that. There's going to be more than just the live programming once a month, but this is one of the key features. And anyway, just to dive in, today's topic is presence, kindness, perception, and learning. And if you saw the description of the workshop, what it said is there would be guided somatic inquiry, lecture, and open mic. And what I think is that I'm going to try to keep the piece that might feel like a lecture to a bare minimum. But I'll probably say some stuff here and there, which is designed to be helpful to understand what we're doing. But my basic intention here is to give you an experience and to leave time for us to talk about the experience. So basically, what I'd like to do today is probably 4 rounds of a particular practice, which some of you who know me, and I see some familiar faces, will be familiar with, which is called the presence mantra. And it may be new to others of you, but this is central to all the work that I do. All the work I do with clients and in my online programs, including the Grounded Connection program, which is a 16-week online group coaching program where we work with the presence mantra throughout the program. And another thing that some of you already know about me is that my approach to embodiment always places a large emphasis on what I would call anytime, anywhere awareness. So I am trained as a Feldenkrais practitioner, and if you practice the Feldenkrais method, there's a couple different ways to do that, but basically you're in a classroom setting or you're in a setting with a practitioner working one-on-one. And so there's all kinds of wonderful things that you can learn in those contexts, but for me, you don't fully kind of get the benefit of the Feldenkrais method if you don't also get some sense of how would I use the Feldenkrais method when I'm walking down the street? How would I use it at family dinner, right? So everything that I teach, even though we hold classes like this and we do practices that we set aside time to do, I like to be very clear that I'm trying to teach principles and strategies that can be applied in your everyday life. And of course, to apply things in your everyday life involves some kind of improvisation. It involves some sort of understanding on your own. How do I use this? Separate from, following a guided practice with a teacher, or even something you might do as a morning routine, but it has a kind of a predictability to it. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we're going to do today. And basically, with the size of the group I see right now, I think we'll probably stay in the main room. Might have breakout groups at some point, but basically we're going to do a bit of practice and we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to do a bit more practice and we're going to talk about it. And the practice will be in the same basic form throughout our time together today, but hopefully by doing 4 different rounds of it, we can sort of notice the layers, right? And notice how we can take something simple and keep building with it. So just very briefly, I want to sort of explain the pathway by explaining again the title of what we're doing today. So again, presence, kindness, perception, and learning. And here's the sort of in the nutshell version of what I'm intending by that. So presence could be defined in many ways. I'm sure you could go out there and find many different definitions, but basically if you're going to do anything at all well, you need to be present, right? If you're in a conversation with someone, you need to be really present in order to actually stay with everything they're saying. You're going to hope that the person who's listening to you talk is present, right? If you're, trying to do a fine motor skill, you need to be present. If you're trying to do complex math, you need to be present, et cetera, right? So just taking as a given that being more present, being more online, we might say having my attention where I wish to have it and having my attention stay in that place. This is all what we're referring to with presence. Okay, so let's say I'm present, more or less, but then another feature of experience is that I'm always, always, always having a relationship with myself. So even if no one else is around, for me, this guy Seth is always around and I have to deal with him all day long. And what's he up to? Well, he's trying to be present, but he's not always present. He's trying to do things, but he doesn't always succeed, right? So there's always these moments where this guy that is always around is maybe not doing what I want him to do entirely. And how do I deal with that? And so this is the next basic thing here. What I'm going to put forward is if I can be kind to this guy, he's going to have an easier time, right? Rather than I keep bugging him every time he messes up. And where we're going, presence, kindness, perception, and learning. I just want to make the leap right now that this kindness practice is not simply let's love ourselves more. This is a good idea, but it's specifically tied to the question of learning, right? So if I want to learn something new, and again, pretty much all day long, every day, I'm encountering things that I haven't encountered before, or I'm solving little problems. But learning, the way I would like to refer to it here, it's almost like the word life. Okay, life is learning. We're humans. We love learning. We manage to organize ourselves and have good experiences through our capacity to learn. But before we get to learning, perception, right? Perception is just how we take in the world, how we take in our experience. There's many different layers to it. But in particular for presence and for kindness and moving towards the goal of optimal learning, I can learn to perceive finer grained details that essentially tell me that I'm going towards that which I want to go towards, or I'm actually maybe going a little away from it. Right. And we'll do some specific things today where we can sort of see what are the signals that tell me kind of where I'm going. You could maybe say that helped me to orient. And then finally learning. I already sort of said it, but a good life, let's say, probably is more likely to happen if I have a good experience of learning, right? I can encounter new things all the time. I can look at what's going on in the news in this crazy world of today, and I can go, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. But if I have an overall sort of relationship to learning and dealing with new things, that's what we're after here. So this is presence, kindness, perception, and learning. So as I mentioned, we're going to work with something I call the presence mantra. Some of you here know it. It'll be new to others of you. But we're going to do it in 4 rounds. And our goal in this first round is just to do that thing I called becoming present. So for the most part, people look like they're awake. They're sitting upright. They're here. You may have some quality of presence that you can already identify. But before I guide you into something, I'll just ask you to sort of notice what is the experience now? How present do you feel? Or how do you experience presence? And one other general question is, as you are tuning into your experience right now, how are you doing that? So all I really asked you to do was pay attention. but there's many ways to pay attention. There's many places you can put your attention. What are you doing? All right, so the presence mantra involves 5 different, we might say, places you could put your attention, but more than places, they are relationships. They're dynamic processes. And as I mentioned, there are 5 of them. It could be that I came up with 23 of them, but 5 seems like a good number. And these are 5 relationships that are always present no matter what in every single moment of your life. So that's why they're valuable. And all we're going to do this first time around is basically recognize those relationships in order to see if tuning into these 5 things has any kind of impact on my sense of presence. So you probably won't be surprised by the first relationship that I'll ask you to tune into, and that's your breath. There's a lot of fancy things that you can notice or do with your breath, but here the invitation is just to connect to the breath. And if you work with breath awareness over time, what can happen is just the fact that you're breathing, even though other things are happening, it just becomes more part of the experience of every moment of your life. Like when I stop and think about this, I'm pretty much almost always aware of my breathing. Not 100%, but compared to another point in time, I've just done this enough that it's like, as you're doing right now, you're hearing someone talk to you and you're trying to understand what are they saying, but it's like, while the person says this, my breath is going in. And while the person says that, my breath is going out. And just aware of that rhythm. It's background, perhaps, but it's always there. And so for a moment, we put it in the foreground. Something that's always true, so long as you're not an astronaut, is that you are living in the field of gravity and you are connected to a solid surface. Again, this is not rocket science, literally. But if you foreground it, if you actually feel your sitting bones on the chair, your feet on the floor, and for each of these relationships, there's different ways of paying attention, but one way that we often categorize where our attention goes is, does it go to the inside or does it go to the outside? So the breath moves in and outside of your body. And with ground, you can think of your bones as an internal ground. So for me, when I say ground, to me, that also means notice the bones, but just notice what's solid in your body, out beyond your body, but that which supports the uprightness of your body. And then a third relationship that's always present via the body is that your body is in space. So you might notice that you can kind of feel the distance to the wall to your left or to your right. You might even be able to feel that one of those walls is closer or further away. And of course, there is space on the inside of your body. Easy to imagine inside your mouth, inside your lungs, but you could even think of inside your arms, inside your skull, inside your feet. Your body bends space. Okay. And there's always sound. Now, for this category, you can imagine that it would be quite different if you were outside right now, if you were in a busy restaurant. And as I mentioned, this is a anytime, anywhere practice. It's definitely something you can do, not just in the quiet of your home, but everywhere you go, there's some kind of sound. And your body makes a sound. Your breath, your heartbeat. If you're moving around, maybe you're making a little noise because you're shifting your weight. And lastly, you're always in a relationship to light. And this is true if your eyes are open or closed. And it also obviously depends on the environment, but at least with some of you, I can sort of sense that there's a window because it looks like there's more light in one part of the room or more shadow in another part. And when you're in shadow, when you're in light, when a different amount of light is coming into the eyes, your eyes respond to that. If your eyes are open and you're looking around, you simply have visual information. You have shapes, colors. And it's easy to have your eyes open and see enough not to kind of bump into things, but to actually ask yourself about the visual information that's coming in and really slow down enough to notice this shape and that. Could be another pathway to presence. So these can be 5 different pathways. And I call this the presence mantra because to help people remember it, I just suggest that they remember those 5 words: breath, ground, space, sound, light. I'll repeat that enough times today that hopefully later today, sometime after the Zoom call, you can just notice breath, ground, space, sound, and light in other situations to notice what that does for you. But this is our first round, and all we really did with those 5 relationships is said, hey, look, they exist, and sort of bring your attention to them. But now, just curious what happened. I don't presume that I'll hear from every one of you in every round, but if you have something to share, now's the time to unmute. But you might just ask yourself, how do you feel now compared to before? Did something shift, or was there an interesting moment in that you'd like to comment on? Did it put you in a non-verbal place? Yeah, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I started seeing relationships between some of the words with the other words. And one word was light and breath. And at first I couldn't feel a relationship, but then I'm thinking how light comes in pulses. And I started thinking about, breath and heart coming from that word. And I thought, that's interesting, something to look into.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been learning more about light, which, as you can tell, it's the last in the sequence. The original sequence was only 4 and light wasn't there. And I was walking in the woods one day under tree cover and it was sunny. And so the the sun kept bursting through and then being stopped and bursting through, and it was like a strobe light. And I could feel that the muscles in my eyes were adjusting for every flash of the sun. And that, if there's too much sun, I go like this, I'm exaggerating, but you can see that I'm starting to do something with my neck. My breath is shifting. Maybe if I do this and try to talk to you, you hear my voice is a little different. So it's partly just that these things, they're all in the mix. Maybe if we just call it perception, right? But if I hear a sound over here, I turn my head to see it, and I have already changed the shape of my chest that I'm breathing into. Right. So in that sense too, it might not be that we can map each one in every moment into the other, but all those experiences are happening. All of them influence my, let's say, shape of my body or my orientation in space. And then each time I change those things, I change everything else. So as we sit here and wonder if someone's going to say anything, one thing you could notice is maybe it feels like, okay, we were doing this process a minute ago and someone was guiding and but are you still breathing now? Are you still on a surface? Are you still in space? Is there still sound, light? Right. So one of the things over time when you work with this and it becomes a little more second nature, you can find yourself with other people in some kind of social context like this. Zoom call is obviously very different than being in person, but you can notice even the rhythm of my speech. Right? Every time I stop speaking, even for a moment, it's a little easier to hear the birds outside your window. Right. And you can also just try to like block out the birds outside my window because I'm trying to hear the person on the Zoom call. And there's not a right or wrong, but there's also a more all-encompassing sense that maybe just notices a broader spectrum of things. And then I'm still relating, I'm still in a dynamic space. Or maybe I say something that I think is just normal, but it reminds you of something painful. Just arbitrary, I use the word chair. And for you, that brings something up because I don't know. But that memory then changes your breathing, right? So this stuff is moment by moment in that way. And I'll just say a word to a few people here who I know are very familiar with this practice. You're certainly welcome to share as well. Or if not, we'll just go right into round two. Is this making sense, at least that this basic tuning into these 5 things wakes up a little more of a sense of presence? Okay, nodding, thumbs up. All right. Well, so let's come back to the practice, but now, as I mentioned, it makes a big difference throughout my day as I encounter one situation after another and I try to navigate my way through my life if I can have a kind relationship with myself, right? So a basic kind of a kindness practice that I teach is that you simply pause and notice what's happening, right? This could be simpler than going into the presence mantra. It's just sort of like, I have to write 10 emails. I write 3 emails and I decide, let me pause for a moment and see how I'm doing, right? So there's a pause. And then you just get a hit of how you're doing. And then you ask a question. Is there one simple thing I could do right now that would take me a little more in the direction of well-being. So for me right now, I can feel a little dryness in my mouth. I could just say it'd be a little better if I had a sip of water. So the thing is, it's very simple, right? It's not, I'd be feeling better if I had $1 million, and then I have to figure out how to make $1 million. That might take a while, right? It could be as simple as you're shifting your position. I realize I'm not sitting comfortably. Or it could be, I want to open the window and let some fresh air in. So this is a very basic kind of thing to do. It might mean I make a note of something that I keep thinking about because I know I have to do it before tomorrow, but now I'm going to write a Post-it note and I'm going to put it where I know I'll see it. Now I'm more comfortable and confident that I won't forget that thing. And it's just, right. But I can do this as a regular thing. Now, if you already kind of have this practice, another thing you can do to be kind to yourself is to go to the presence mantra. If you agree that being more present makes things easier, then I'm going to give myself a little gift of presence, and that could make things easier. And if we've already done this basic practice in the beginning of sort of saying those 5 relationships are there and I'm connected to them, how could I then use those specific relationships to sort of nourish myself, right? So what we're going to do now is we're just going to tune in again to those 5 relationships, but I'm going to sort of invite you to be a little bit of a sort of an imaginal aspect to this, but it's just to notice that these 5 relationships could each be a resource to you. So how might I do that? All right, so I notice my breathing again. And suppose you're feeling a little tired. So if you are feeling a little tired, you might start to notice, that's interesting. Every time I breathe in, there's a kind of an activation there. There's an active energy. There's a kind of a waking up energy that comes with the in-breath. There's a rising feeling. And if you're familiar with breathwork practices, breathwork is a lot more popular these days. There's various practices of breath holding. And the practices where you breathe in and you have a full kind of lung full of air and you hold the breath in, those are the practices that are supposed to enliven you and wake you up. But even if you're not holding your breath, just sort of putting an accent in your attention on the in-breath can be a waking up. So right now, just noticing that's a resource. Now, it could be, of course, that you feel a little like you drank too much coffee, or you just got some really a kind of a jolt of some surprising news or something, and you feel like you're running a little too high. Then noticing the exhale, right? The exhale has this calming effect on it. It's a sort of a sinking, a relaxing, a letting go. Using the example of breath work again, you can hold your breath after the exhale. There's various ways of doing that where you count to a certain number and you do it on a certain rhythm, but rather than having a whole practice, just noticing the quality of the exhale. And then we breathe all day, so it can be ordinary, but also with particular attention, maybe to the inhale or maybe to the exhale. If you just sort of tune into what you know to be true, that it's oxygen that gives you life. Can you breathe as if the breath is like nectar? And just really, I'm nourishing myself. Every breath is a gift. Someone noticed already when we start to move from one relationship to the other, maybe your attention continues to hold on. So it will move to ground, but maybe the breath is still there, right? Maybe you're still aware of the breath. But now if you notice the solidity under you and inside you, the bones, just notice that that's the source of your uprightness. We might even add another kind of a way of thinking about uprightness. That's your dignity. So what we're not interested here in doing is like sitting up straight like the way my mother told me when I was at the dinner table. But if I'm slumped, how does that make me feel? Versus what if I imagine my head floating upwards, my spine lengthening, right? Rather than feeling the ground or the chair under me as something that I'm sinking into, I can imagine almost that I was levitating and then the ground rose up and it's raising me upwards. So if I'm in my day and I'm pausing and I'm wanting to kind of nurture myself, I might have this idea of kind of drinking a delicious breath, and I might just notice, oh, you know, my skeleton, my muscles, my sense of self, I can invite it to be upright, more dignified. And if you're truly comfortably upright, the breath should still be easy. So it's not holding a posture based on appearance. And if you shift your weight a little left and right or forward and back, this too can be a gift because, and this is especially true in a social situation, often we think presence or, you know, demonstrating presence to the person I'm with means being totally still. But actually, shifting around a little bit and then maybe coming back to stillness after moving just reminds me that the surfaces underneath me are there for leverage. They help me move. Right? When you walk, you're always pushing off the ground to go somewhere. So ground is a resource. Or again, if I have a lot of energy that maybe more energy than I can use right now, I can have a sense of sending it downwards by sending my attention downwards into the earth. Earth can absorb anything much more than my body. So a friend of mine who talks about grounding upwards, because every time you move upwards, there's always a downward movement. So you can think of these things together, like the spine lengthening, the head lifting as connected to this grounding down. If you stand on one leg, it can be helpful to think of the ground or think of a place 10 feet under the ground of the leg you're standing on. Makes you more stable. Space. All of these are contextual, right? If you're trying to breathe and there's toxins in the air, like the best breath probably involves going somewhere else. If you're walking in the winter and it's very icy and slippery, it might be hard to feel that you trust the ground. By the looks of it, everyone here is in their home, so I'm presuming that it's a fairly safe and welcome environment for you. But a lot of how space feels is also our projections, right? But what if you just assume, especially if you can kind of talk to yourself and say, yeah, I think this is a safe environment. I'm in my home, or maybe you're in the park and you look around and you say, this is a pleasant place, everything's fine. Then you just notice the sense that the surrounding space welcomes you. That it's okay for my body to expand outwards into this space. I don't have to pull my body inwards away from it, which is something I might find myself doing from time to time. But actually, spontaneity with my body is okay in this space. The space around me is a resource. And this might involve a sense, again, of the body being able to expand. Now, I used the word imaginal before, because just saying that the space is welcome or just saying that my body expands doesn't mean I always feel that there's instantly a response to my intention. But holding the intention, we could say, primes the possibility, right? And sometimes I notice, I wasn't really paying attention, but it's almost as if my body was assuming that this space is not available for me to move into, that I have to hold to one place. Okay. So then if I turn to sound, how can sound be a resource? If the car outside my window has its alarm going off for the last half hour, again, I might actually want to go somewhere else. But when I experience sound in a way that feels really nourishing to me, like really good, like I love the sound, that's often something I call music. So the trick here is, I'm pretty sure no one has a string quartet in their living room performing for them. But you can start to notice that the various sounds of the world and your body have a rhythm. That this sound happens, followed by that sound, which maybe invites your attention to go down to the left, up to the right, somewhere nearby, somewhere far away. And as I already kind of played with before, you're listening to someone talk. And sure, you want to understand what they're saying, but you notice there's a rhythm to the voice. You notice the voice goes up and down. You notice the pauses, the quality of the voice. And if it's a conversation, you can tune into your own voice this way. You can speak in such a way that it's perhaps a little bit subjective, but you can speak as if part of the meaning that you want to impart is in the melody, is in the rhythm. You can invite your speech to be more melodic. And when we hear music that we enjoy, it becomes natural to dance to the music. Right? So we can just, if sound is happening, we can start to notice that sound might provoke me to turn my head or to shift my weight. I don't really have to think about it, because I don't really have to think about it when I dance to music that I like. But if you're like John Cage, the experimental musician who famously put on a piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, where a pianist sat in front of a piano and didn't play it for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And what he was doing was highlighting that there is a music to all the sound of the world that's always there. You can start to listen for that, and you can start to treat it as music. Again, if it's the car alarm, it's going to be harder to treat it as music. I think that's probably true for most of us. But even that you could treat as music, or you could say, I want to be somewhere more musical, and you move away from that sound. Okay, finally, light. So noticing light, or noticing the experience of the absence of light behind your eyes. But what would it be like for light to be a nourishing experience, for the visual field to be nourishing? So this might just mean inviting a softness to the eyes. But also, just like the metaphor with the breath before, that you breathe in, it's like drinking nectar or something like that. What if everything you see, you're drinking it in? Right? Like if you look at the Zoom screen and then you look away, you can probably more or less remember the Zoom screen a little bit, right? Because you took it into you. The people in your life that you spend a lot of time with, that you love, that aren't here with you right now, but you've been with them. And part of being with them is this visual experience. There's a word for this, which is ingression. You're ingressing everything that's in front of you. And we could talk about more than just vision. But you can sort of, and of course you can look at a plastic water bottle, or you can look at a piece of fine art, right? So it might be partly where you direct your gaze, but it could just be that you look at the plastic bottle, but rather than just saying, oh, trash, you kind of in a childlike way, you become interested in the shapes. You sort of reach out with your eyes and touch what you're seeing. And then if we spend another moment here, and then I'm going to ask how people are doing or what's coming up. But again, these things mesh, these things interact. So if I'm just sort of swaying, which you might notice I do that on Zoom more than a lot of people, because I just sort of gave myself permission a long time ago to not sit still. Some people might think that's funny, but for me, it's like this little swaying, it allows me to feel the surfaces in an ongoing way. I feel my body moving through space. I feel my joints are awake and alive. I can enjoy the breath as it comes in and out. I can sort of invite a childlike curiosity in my listening and my seeing. And another gift you can give yourself is to do this in a place that you know is beautiful. Just you go for a walk wherever you like to walk, and you do this in a beautiful place, and it really, right? Why do we go to the park in order to nourish ourselves? It's because all of these simple experiences are so much nicer. Okay, so here we are again, looking at each other, wondering if someone will speak. But you're invited to do so. And you're invited to notice as we're here together, as we're speaking, all of these things are present, and not only present, but if we want, they're present as resources that we can intentionally draw upon.
I really like the idea of inviting my voice to sound more melodic. To keep that in mind.
How did it sound just now?
Not quite as melodic as I'd hoped, but better than I usually think I sound anyway. So.
I was partly prodding you just because I figure, I've been doing most of the talking here. You haven't had much of a chance to like warm up your voice, but if you keep going,
You want me to just keep talking? Is that it?
Yeah, what's the first thing you did when you woke up this morning, Karine?
Open my eyes. What I've also been noticing is even though you can't really see it in my Zoom square, I'm actually moving quite a bit and moving my legs and my arms, my hands. It's just not showing up in like my shoulders as much.
Are you
And for a
noticing
minute there, I forgot. Sorry.
as you
So
keep
just for a minute.
do you notice now we're trying to make music together and we
Yeah.
need to rehearse a little. But do you notice that you speak and you stop and you speak and you stop when you speak?
Yes, obviously. But I'll tell you, I haven't been aware of it as much as I am right now. Just trying to think about the inviting it to be melodic makes a difference.
Yeah. Like all of these things, it's always there, but now you're saying I'm more aware of it than usual. Are you aware of the rhythm of your head nodding?
Yes.
Right. Super simple, but and I'm seeing some people smiling and I'm wondering if anyone was sort of noticing the melody in Karine's voice, noticing the rhythm. Yeah.
Definitely, I was noticing it because I have experienced my thyroid removed, and thus my vocal cords were cut, and also I'm a stroke survivor. So I went through dysarthria and some other issues to get my voice back. Yeah, and I could hear a lilt in your voice, Tareen, and it made me smile because that lilt means so much in terms of making a sound, because there's an emotional aspect coming forward, and it that lilt can be so small, but it can bring on such a big smile.
Yeah. There was a moment there when you, after sharing your experience with your thyroid and what you've been through and recovering, and you were speaking to Karine, but you said, and I could just sense that you were going into something much deeper than this couple minutes of exchange, right? So the other thing is I use the word imaginal and I use the ridiculous example before that I might trigger someone by using the word chair if they happen to have the particular experience. But more generally speaking, every word we emit from our mouths, it's like we're showering the person we're speaking to with images at all times. And these images, like in your case with your voice, tuning into the voice, it can, not every word, but those particular things that pop up be particularly poignant or activating in some way. So we're starting to get into the anytime, anywhere aspect of this. But of course, what we did by going through the 5 relationships in a sort of systematic way, it is kind of a practice because it's useful to have those things I come back to. But also, and I think a few people here, like Karine, who knows the presence mantra well, I think could tell you is you don't need the amount of time that we just took with me guiding you through. Like you can get to the place of in a minute, you just sense all those things being there. And then maybe one of them, maybe it's space or maybe it's light, is the one that interests me right here and now. So it's not even that there's always this need to juggle 5 balls in the air or something. But yeah, so again, presence. And now second round with this theme of kindness. I'd love to hear from someone else if there's thoughts, questions, experiences to share. Yeah.
I'm just really enjoying this field that is being created on Zoom, which I usually resist, but I've been reading your words. And now, for the first time, well, I have done quite a lot of Zoom things, but I've done Feldenkrais over the years, over many, many years. And I'm really enjoying this evolution of energy that I feel in myself with these people on the screen that I don't know. And I don't know you, but I just in kind of a lot of sadness and grief and joy at the moment.
Hmm.
Wood here on the other side of the continent.
Hmm.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's amazing what comes up when we just sort of tune into what's really there. So the presence mantra is something that kind of drew on a decade of experience with the Feldenkrais method and other things. But then again, it's actually just so ordinary. Like the fact that there's a chair under my butt, the fact that my breath is going in and out, these are pretty ordinary things. To invoke Feldenkrais one more time, he has a book that's called The Elusive Obvious.
Mhm.
And I think that's what a lot of practices do for us. When we meditate, we just illuminate the obvious fact that we're breathing and that focusing on the breath can shift the mind, or we go running, we just highlight the fact that my limbs are capable of doing this, and there's maybe no purpose to the run because I'm not trying to get from A to B, but I'm just awakening something that's actually always there.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you want to say more or not, up to you, but you mentioned grief. And
Mhm.
it just brought up for me, I was in Vermont last week, and I had a really wonderful opportunity to just slow down and be in nature. And I was just out in the meadow, and it was just so beautiful. And like, it's always so beautiful, but I just had this recognition of how much of my life I overlooked that kind of beauty, right? And that was a kind of experience of grief that I had.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
don't know if that's how it is for you now, but
But the quality of presence just here right now in this odd, obscure way of connecting. Because I live in a pretty isolated place. So just it's something that I have been aware of resisting. But when I give myself the opportunity to just be, the quality of presence seems to just expand in my body and in with whatever we're doing here. Like Feldenkrais was such a genius in a way because he brought the physicality of in which I really, it is where we are. So that's great.
right.
So thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just looked down at my notes and I saw that another question I was going to ask was, which maybe Sarah was already answering a little bit, but what does kindness feel like? Yeah, Gloria.
Two words come to mind: softness, and I'm forgetting the other word. Oh, softness and a smile. A small smile.
Huh. Yeah, that's beautiful. Like I'm trying to work something out and it's difficult. It's like, what if I just had a little more softness and a little smile while I did this? Would that
Yeah.
maybe give me a 1% shift, right? This is not like we snap our fingers and you know, start levitating. But there's things that are that simple. There's an instruction that I hear some meditation teachers use, which is also to smile with the eyes, right? You just imagine the smile as being a little lift in the corner of the eyes. Connection, not alone. Yeah. Yeah, that's another point here, is that we're going to be moving to the next piece, which is perception, right? But what we're playing with, you could say already, is perception or attention. And if I'm looking at you and I'm smiling with my eyes, how do you appear to me? Versus I'm looking at you because I'm trying to analyze you. Like, can you feel that's different in the eyes? So these things aren't disconnected. There's an experiment where you have a bunch of little kittens who are born blind. And you take half the kittens and you put them in a little wagon. And wherever the other kittens go in the room, you pull the wagon around so that they can, you know, see as well. And you do this, I don't know, for a week or however long the scientists did it. The kittens in the wagon, they don't learn how to see. Because it's not just the eyes, it's the eyes orienting as my feet touch the ground and move me through space, right? It's the whole system. We could say the same thing for the ears. We don't hear just with the ears. We don't see just with the eyes. And part of what comes in might be, yeah, our thinking. The smile or the lack of a smile could actually change my perception. Okay, well, so let's move back into our tried and true 5 relationships, but I'm going to emphasize some particulars now, and most of them will probably be kind of familiar. We're building off of things that we've done already, but I mentioned this idea that in any given moment, maybe it's not dramatic, but someone says something that hits me a certain way, or I suddenly remember something I have to do today, or could just be, I don't know why, but something suddenly feels different. And did I just move towards well-being, or did I just move away from well-being? Maybe only the smallest amount, but can I notice that? Right? And people have different experiences with this. This is not such a nice kind of example, but I think some people can recognize it. But people who grow up in a home that isn't safe, right? Those people get really good at reading other people, right? And someone in their presence starts to get a little annoyed, they pick it up really quick because they maybe had a situation where I really have to notice, because sometimes, you know, there's something less than safe that's going to unfold and I want to have the most warning possible, right? Again, that's not a very happy example, but I think it's one that you can recognize. But this can also be something that we can cultivate in all of these 5 relationships. Okay. So if you're present again to your breathing, and maybe you shift around here and there, and just look for, without forcing anything, a breath that feels good right now. But let's try playing with this idea of associations. So just all you do is you listen to your breathing, but I'm going to say a series of words, just single words. And it could be that you hear a word and then nothing happens, but it could be that you hear a word and you notice that your breath either opens, or you might notice that your breath slightly restricts. So you're breathing. Money. Sunshine. Mountain. Pollution. Forgotten. Friendship. Alone. Warmth. So we could go on with that, but just sort of notice for yourself, was there any of those words that seemed to open the breath or close the breath? Or maybe it wasn't the word that did it, but in response to the word, did the breath shift? And then just, this is a kind of a cruder thing, but if you just simply restrict your breath for a moment, just don't allow your breath to flow as easily as it could, and just notice what happens to your whole experience. And then again, if you allow the breath to move, maybe you think of that idea of nourishing yourself with breath. How different is that experience? So the proposal here is that ideally, my breath would be free and flowing. But when it's a little less than free and flowing, that's good information, right? And it might be the moment where I shift my position, or it might be the moment where I take a break from work for 5 minutes or whatever, right? There's a signal there in either direction. So now, can you shift your weight to the left? You're in a chair, you kind of lift your right hip, you come more onto your left sit bone. And go back to the middle and just do that a few times. Try to make it comfortable. There's probably someone on the call who would feel more comfortable shifting to the right, which we'll also do, but just make it as comfortable as you can. Make it to shift to your left. And as you shift to your left, as if someone had reached in under your earlobe and they'd painted a stripe all the way down the left side of your spine. What happens to the length of the left side of your spine when you shift to the left? The assumption would be when my weight's over the left sit bone, that's the moment my left side is being supported, and that's why I'm talking about the left side of the spine. And you might add this idea from before of dignity, uprightness. Imagine the left side of your spine gets long. So for those of you who are dipping your left ear towards the floor, maybe the left ear actually goes higher than the right ear when you go to the left. You might feel the ribs along the left side opening. And then if you come back to the middle and before shifting again, you just awakened the left side maybe a little. So imagine that stripe down the left side of your spine, but also imagine a stripe down the right side of the spine, which we haven't invited into the process yet. Does one of those lines feel longer than the other? And if you shift to the left again for a moment, just sort of ask yourself, how tall am I? How close is my head to the ceiling? How does my breath feel? And then shift over to the right. And when you're on the right, do you feel taller or shorter? You can go back to the middle and shift to the right a few times. Again, I'm suggesting if you go to the right, you could actually lift your right ear rather than drop your head to the right. So we're, again, just slowing down a very simple thing. You might shift your weight from side to side at any point in your day, but we're doing that very slowly and we're noticing what happens. So once you sort of feel like you've found this idea on each side, if you shift once to the left and once to the right, and when you go left, you invite the left side of your spine to be long. You think of your left ear raising up a little. Your right ear maybe dips, and then you go to the right and you invite length through the right side of your spine. Well, maybe if you keep doing this, you'll have a feeling of balancing, but especially if you have an old injury or even if you don't, a lot of people really notice I find more length on that side. Or if I want to find the same length on the other side, it feels like I have to force it. I have to manufacture it. On one side, it's just there. Does that resonate with anyone? That one side just feels more naturally like you can get length. Okay. Yeah. Go to the side that's easier for you. Stay there. And as I mentioned, keep the length in that side of the neck where you've shifted by having the ear on that side a little higher. So you can see this is my right ear. It's a little higher because I'm shifted to the right. And I'm imagining the whole right side is long. Now, if I stay on the right side and actually tilt my head the other way, can you feel that you lose the length in the neck? Right? And so even if you just stay on this side, but you have one ear higher or the other, when is it easier to breathe? And here you might notice there's actually a relationship to where I can find length in my spine and where I can find a fuller breath. Okay. So the principle here is there could be more than one, but it's this sense of length, of lightness, right? Feldenkrais would say, in ideal action, and this could be all the complicated things you see people doing in the Olympics, so it doesn't mean that I'm just straight with my spine, but in any well-organized action, the spine is lengthening. Even if I'm rounding myself, the back of my spine is getting very long, right? Even if I'm twisting, there is a path from the bottom to the top of my spine that is a lengthening path if that twisting is not the kind of twisting that ends me up in the hospital. And if twisting that ends me up in the hospital, I'm also collapsing somewhere in my spine. So do you notice a little sense of more length here, less length there, right? This is something that we can perceive. And again, I don't feel totally upright, and maybe it's just a matter if I shift a little and now I can find more uprightness. Now I can find more breath. Okay. So space. Let's again use the left and the right. So as you sit, maybe come into something a little more like stillness without feeling that you have to be stiff like a statue. But as you're sitting there, just invite your attention to only be interested in what's to the right of you. So eyes are open or closed, doesn't matter, but your interest is entirely to the right. You're feeling the space out to your right. We can build on what we've been doing. You feel the right side of your spine. You feel the ribs under your armpit and down to your waist along the right side. And just notice your body touches the space. But is your body touching the space and feeling welcome? Is it expanding out into the space? Or is there a recoil? Is there any sense that any of the ribs on the right are actually pulling in towards the spine? They're pulling away from the space to the right. So we don't necessarily often think about our bodies touching space or the feeling of space, but we can ask about it. And then if you shift your attention to the left, now all you're interested in is in the left. But do you notice immediately a shift in quality where you realize, I like the way space feels on that side better than the other side? Do you actually notice a preference? And again, you could ask, does my body willingly expand out into that space? Or is there a funny way that my body is like pulling inwards away from that space? This too can be something that we have a story about. So a colleague of mine who was at a friend's house once, she told me the story of the little boy who seemed frightened of his father. And every time his father spoke, he turned to the left to look at his father, but he also shrank back and down. And over, he turned to the left and shrank back and down. She said, I could see the beginnings of the scoliosis. Just a little boy is kind of afraid of his father. When I was growing up, I don't have a story like that, but I can tell you my father always sat to my left and my mother always sat to my right. So there's a way that the space to my right maybe holds a little of that relationship, and the space to the left might hold that other one. I don't know if anyone else here had sort of assigned seating at the family dinner table, but maybe you can feel it. Or if you're on a subway, you just, person to your left seems okay, but you're not so sure about that person off to your right. You can feel it. So again, maybe just go to the side that feels nicer for you right now. But to be a little more crude, just think, that space is my space. I'm allowed to move into it. I can, I don't have to move, but that space over there is for me. I can do whatever I wish. And then how does that space feel if you think, I better not go over there, or I don't want to go over there, or I'm trying to avoid what's over there? You can just feel that somatic taste of the space. And again, if you're on the subway, maybe no one's sitting to your right, but then the subway stops and someone gets in and sits down to your right. And in that moment, what happens to the space? Maybe it's some fully realized, enlightened individual, and like it feels great when they sit next to you. But so yeah. Okay, so moving along, sound. I already suggested sound could be music. Sound could also be noise, right? And there's a left and a right, and some people actually hear better out of one ear. But if you just pay attention to your ears right now, does one ear, as if it was a mouth, does it feel more open than the other ear? And if I don't hear so well in my left ear, I probably go like this a lot, right? Which is going to change my posture and my breathing and the way I relate to the ground and everything. But now just imagine your ears are like mouths, and imagine that both ears open and close as if they were a mouth. Open and close. Okay. You can make them hand gesture or not. But does one ear open more easily than the other? And the ear that opens more easily, do you notice, are you actually shifted with your weight more on the side where the ears open? If you shift your weight left and right as you were doing before, does that change the feeling of how open? Like if you move to the left and the right, but you just pay attention to your right ear, when does the right ear feel more open? When your weight is to the right or when your weight is to the left? Or if you just move your head around in any direction and you sort of feel, it's as if the aperture of my ears is slightly changing. And if you're out on the street and an ambulance goes by, the muscles in your ears will contract to protect you. Right? So just to play, again, imagine that every sound you hear, you have the experience that those sounds are invading my ears and I want to keep them out. So you kind of squint with your ear in a way, right? But feel what happens to your breathing, what happens to your neck, the space in your throat, just the overall tone of your musculature throughout your body. And then if you can identify something pleasant in your audio field, what happens if you're welcoming those sounds? You're deliciously drinking in those glorious and beautiful sounds. And the ears are open and welcoming. So moment by moment, the muscles in my ears may shift, and I'm glad that happens. I'm glad that my ears do close when the ambulance goes by on the street. But if at any given moment, the sounds that I'm with are more or less okay, do I notice that I'm doing something with my ears one way or the other? Could I invite my ears into a new place? Or could I simply notice? Like if I were to, I'll do this gradually, but I'm going to start speaking a little louder. I'm going to speak louder. When my voice gets louder, do you hear that, or do you feel that, right? You respond to that, and it's not just the ears. Okay. You see, we're going slower with this because the point is that this gets very fine-grained. But again, when you work with these things over time, they could just be there in every moment. So let's try, let's just go to lights, and let's try closing the eyes. And just pay attention to your left eye. Feel the weight of your left eye. Feel the muscles around the eye. Imagine where's the very back of the eyeball. How does it sit in the socket? And then shift to the right eye. Same thing. shape. Feeling of the musculature. So you might notice that you just prefer the feeling of one of your eyes. If both eyes could feel the same, you'd prefer they both felt like that eye. Now, if your eyes are closed, but you just the smallest amount, you squeeze them a little tighter and let go. And do that a number of times. But notice when you do that, do the muscles actually work harder on one side? Are you shutting one eye more than the other? And on the side where you're shutting the eye more, what's happening to the length of your neck on that side? Is one of your ears dipping down? Is it on the side where the eye is shutting more, or the eye that's less? And then just let go. And maybe try covering your eyes with your hands. The way, if you want to look at me for a moment just to see, I like to put my heels of my hands right on my cheekbones. And then I actually cross the fingers of one hand over the other so that the seal is really complete. But also my nose is totally unobstructed, so the breath is simple, and I'm putting no pressure on the eyeballs themselves. There's actually space between the eyeballs and the palm, so you're not pressing on the eyes. And then with one hand, keep the fingers on the forehead, but just move the heel of the hand that's on the cheekbone a little away, and a little bit of light comes in, and then move it back. And go very slowly. But what you're doing, it's like a swinging door. You're just letting a tiny bit of light into that eye. The eye is still closed. And then you're covering it. But see if you can feel the light coming in. And feel what shifts when the light's blocked out again. There's muscles in your eyes also respond to the light. Like you need a certain amount of light to see, but too much light is blinding. So just feel how the eyes do that. And then if you take your hands away, what we just did might be a little moment in a Feldenkrais lesson. And it's not so much that it's better to have more or less light in the eyes. It's always relative to your situation. But you might feel that one eye that you did that movement, it's a little more educated than the other eye. You might just feel again, does one eye feel larger or softer than the other? And then if you open your eyes, there's two basic ways of using the eyes, which are both important, but they can also be things we do as a default. So let's say how to use your eyes when you're looking at your phone, right? Which is also usually looking down, which does something to your neck and your spine, but it's a narrow focus, right? You could look around your room, but pick out objects like you're analyzing them or you're zeroing in, right? Of course, there's times where you want that precise kind of vision. But then what if you look around with soft eyes, almost like you're looking at your ears, and you just take in everything? And if you go between those two, is there a shift in your breath? And so again, someone might say something in a conversation and suddenly I narrow my eyes. But maybe I notice that I narrowed my eyes and I decide I'd rather have soft eyes. Okay. So that was a lot of detail, but we went through the 5 relationships again. And hopefully it's clear by now that we're doing something in a classroom setting, but I'm suggesting all of this stuff is going on all the time. I'd love to hear thoughts, questions, reflections. Yeah, Catherine.
I noticed a lot of different things, but one thing that really jumped out at me was when we were listening, we were breathing and paying attention to freedom or restriction of breath. And I know while you said certain words, and I noticed that my mind always wanted to get in there first and know better, you know? And I think that's, you know, I mean, that's maybe what these exercises are great for, is a kind of making space for the body to have its own opinions be heard. But for me, that's really strong in all of this work. And it's like, well, the mind thinks it knows better and wants to get in there before anything else happens.
So is it kind of like, how should my ears be? How should my eyes be? What should I?
I felt it more as a prediction, like, oh, this is going to be that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's not a surprise that it comes up in this moment where it started to introduce all this specificity.
Mm.
The trick here, and this, again, the name Feldenkrais has come up a number of times, and that is my sort of foundation. So I'll refer to him, but he talked about ideal human movement, right? What would be the most ideal way to breathe? What would be the most, and the mistake people can make is think that it's perfectionism, right? And it's really, when you start noticing that these tiny things make a difference, and I had years of my Feldenkrais training like this, you can geek out forever on the specificity. I actually have a post on Substack. I think it's called Simplicity, Complexity, and Sensitivity. And I show this little movement of you lift and lower the front of your foot like you were tapping your foot to music. And then you can lift it this way and you can do this. And they're just the simple movements of my ankle, right? If I do them very slowly, with a lot of attention, this is basically how Feldenkrais works, I can transform the feeling in my ankle. But then I could imagine a line from each of my toes back to the heel. And I could go back, and once I've established that image, I can do these movements, but I can think about my big toe, and I can think about my second toe. And when I think of different toes, I'm going to have a subtle but palpable difference that I can tune into, which is really cool. But the mistake would be to think I should have 5 lines on the bottom of my foot all day and always remember which toe that I'm supposed to be thinking about. And then I'm like in some funny place. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that because I think what you said is true. There's a way that this takes us out of thinking, but there's also a kind of a theory here, or a kind of at least an experiential pattern that we begin to notice that we can remember in words, right? Like I've already suggested to you, it'd be better to breathe than not to breathe. It'd be better to have a long spine. So this is the place where kindness also comes in. Because do I slap myself on the wrist every time I realize that I'm slumping, or, you know, I'm contracting my ears more than necessary, or do I just kind of let it go? Anyway, there's a number of layers to that. So I just kind of wanted to piggyback, share those things, but someone else. This is round three.
I can, so some people here may already know this about me, but I have a hearing disability. So I find that I far more rely on my eyes, a lot more, reading lips, and taking in other information around me, not so much just words or things like that, but how to say this, different kinds of cognition is important for me to see a face, facial expression. And this goes to what you were saying about noticing, you know, muscle movements around the eyes or the face. And what I noticed when we were doing the exercise with our eyes closed is that there's this loss of information which tends to cause me anxiety, because I can't, when I lose my eyesight, I can't rely on my hearing as much. And so I'm trying to grapple with, like, how do I adapt as I go through this loss of hearing. I don't know how extensive this will be as I age, but
Right.
it does seem to me that as we go through life, there will be this adaptation that we have to do, and I have to, as much as I have to care for my hearing very much, I also have to care for my eyes a great deal. And so this going through these exercises, there's a slowness to all of this that allows me to have presence with, like, what am I doing here? How can I grapple with this in a fruitful kind of way? So yeah, that's what comes up.
Yeah. So you mentioned the anxiety that happens, right? When you're not able to get all the information from the environment that you want. And I imagine for you that there's certain situations where that sense of not getting information is going to be more important than others, like, I don't know, driving versus all kinds of things that you do throughout the day. So, like, kind of building on this idea of what's ideal, the other thing that Feldenkrais is very clear about, and that's very important, is what's ideal for me. So I can describe ideal breathing, but when I work with one of my clients who the left side of her diaphragm is paralyzed, like, the idea that she should be getting this amazing full breath along the left side is actually, if I were to insist on it, I would be doing something not beneficial for her by assuming that. And so we are looking for, not, even though there's this phrase I use, the ideal human movement, we're looking for this human's ideal movement, right? And so what you can do with any of these details in these categories or these phenomena that we're playing with is you can learn what's the range that I can play with. I can educate my nervous system to notice new details. And every time I do that, the other assumption behind all of what we're doing is that the nervous system will reorganize towards better function if I give it the time. So again, like that movement of the ankle, if I just tap my feet all day, that doesn't improve my ankle. But if I tap my feet in slow motion and very carefully track what's happening and how it ripples through my body, something shifts because I give my body more time than what I typically do. And we can do that with hearing and sight and all of these things. The difference between the left and right is typically a nuance that's available to almost any person in any moment, because we're never having the totally same experience on the two sides. Okay, well, let's end with this question of learning, since it's sort of coming up here. And I could say it a lot of ways, but what I want to say is, maybe, again, if we strive for something ideal, or if we trust this thing that I just said, that if I just give my body fresh information in a friendly way, I will learn. I will improve. So instead of learning, let's just maybe say play. So let's play with the breath. You're breathing. You start breathing faster. Not because fast breathing is good breathing, but just because fast breathing is maybe different than what you were doing a moment ago. Breathe in and out. Right? And then forget about that. Just breathe normal. How else could you shift your breathing? Maybe cover one nostril just for the hell of it. Does it feel like the air goes down one side of the throat? Does it feel like you're breathing more into one lung than the other? Try it on the other side. Like maybe you notice one side of your nose is a little more available for the breath, right? You take your hand away from your nose, but just think of breathing into the back of your lungs. And like, don't try to make it happen. Just imagine the air just flows to the back of my lungs. That's what it does. And a moment later, I'm aware that we're doing this quickly because we're just playing. Now you think, oh, the air, it just fills the front side of my lungs. Imagine that air, rather than being the color of the air, is some wild, beautiful color, like you're breathing some rainbow in and out. And then just kind of dance in your chair. Notice I can push the ground a little with my left foot. I can push the ground with my right foot. And push with both feet. You can have the feeling of pulling the ground with one foot, pushing with the other. Or I can sort of feel that with my sit bones, I'm doing something. Maybe look down as you roll backwards and get round, and then come to the front of the chair, letting your belly open and your chest lift and look a little to the horizon or maybe above. Right? Just giving some simple movement to my spine, but I'm moving through space. Maybe could you draw a circle on the ceiling with the top of your head? But of course, if you do that, you're probably drawing a circle on the chair with your pelvis. You're probably using this leg and then that leg. And whether or not it responds perfectly to the command, can you just imagine the whole time my spine is long? It's as if I'm almost ready to float up and out of the chair like I was levitating. You could move a little faster, a little slower, right? You could make a rhythm to your movement. How does that rhythm interact with the rhythm of your breathing? And while you do this, you could keep doing this, dancing, just doing silly things, but now everything you do, you're paying attention to the left side of the room. When am I moving towards the left side of the room? When am I moving away from the left side of the room? I can think of the left side of the room up by the ceiling or down by the floor. You could choose to think of the right side of the room or the space behind you that you can't see, but it's like you're feeling the space behind you the whole time. Notice we're not looking for something, kind of like last time with the specifics of perception. We're kind of like, well, is this better than that? This is more like, well, what can I do with my relationship to space? You're dancing around. Can you notice that you're making music? Can you notice the sounds? You notice sounds in your environment. Like maybe every time the bird sings, I tap my foot. Or maybe my refrigerator is humming and I could hum that same note or even mentally hum that note, or I could find a harmony to the humming refrigerator that I could hum. I could close one eye just for fun. But if you close one eye, or if you even, some people find that difficult, you could just pretend you're looking out of one eye, like with a telescope, either way. But if all your vision is out of one eye, might feel like your head sits a little differently on the top of your spine. It might change the way you move. If you stick with it for a while, just the one eye, you give yourself this very asymmetrical experience. And then maybe before switching to the other side, you just sort of pause for a moment and notice how that is. Then you could do the other eye, or you could blink your eyes rhythmically as you move so that part of the music is light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. And you just notice too, like, this is kind of whimsical, like, are you playing along or are you actually feeling like you're allowed to play? Is this silly and why am I doing this and what's the point of this? Or is it more like, who cares what's the point? I'm enjoying myself. And if you just keep moving, you can turn, you can twist, you can go in any position, but maybe from time to time, just sort of hold the position and notice, what's my relationship to the ground here? What's the shape of my breath here? Which ear feels more open when I'm here? When you shift to another position, did I just turn towards the light or turn away from the light? Did I just create more space in my belly or did I contract the space in my belly? None of these cues or things are the most important, but maybe by now from the other things, we kind of get that all the same, each of these factors does influence my experience. And as you probably know, if you're here, the whole program, the whole thing I do, I call musicality of being. So we put it all together. My invitation to you is like, what if you just experience life like music? And you just dance to the music of life that's always there. Sometimes I like the music better. When I go to the DMV to renew my driver's license, it's not my favorite music, but there's actually music in the DMV also, right? So you feel free to keep dancing in your chair, but let's sort of bring this little piece to an end and just say presence, kindness, perception, learning. I'm gonna say a couple things about the Substack membership program that's being inaugurated at the beginning of next month, and this is a preview. But before we do that, love to get any final shares from anyone. Final thoughts or questions? What's that last round like, or what was it like to put all 4 rounds of the practice together, sort of see where it points. Yeah, Sylvia. You're muted.
I find it extremely difficult. I mean, it's so different to how I go through life.
Uh-huh.
I usually go through life trying to quiet everything that's happening here. So to start listening in the outside, I mean, it's like, yeah, there are so many sensations already within
Mhm.
and feelings within my heart beating. And I am overwhelmed already when I am with more people, just trying to hold the horses, you know,
Mhm.
and then opening up and like, wow, I don't know if I would be able to be trained to do that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. As I said before, there's 5 relationships here. And on any given day, that might be way more than you need, right? So if you noticed at any point during our call that I liked it when we did that thing in relation to ground, that part made sense to me, then that would be the first thing I would suggest that you take from this. And you don't need all of everything that we just did, right? However, what I would say is part of what can feel overwhelming is that there's all this stuff that I have to block out, right? As opposed to breath is always there. The relationship's the ground, and like I have to balance and not fall over, right? That's always the case. I'm always moving through space. I need to know where I am in space. There's always sounds, there's always visual, right? So there's nothing that we introduced here that isn't already in your life. But the idea of the practice is that I actually get more of a handle on each of these things. And, you know, you can work with it in any way. So again, it's not that you should have felt that you could digest everything we did here in the last couple hours. We did a lot. And at the same time, there is a way to become so intimate with my breath that all the different qualities of breath that I could feel, I'm just very aware of them. I'll say more about Substack, but I'm going to say one thing now because if anyone here, if you decide to join to become a paid member of the Substack, when you get your welcome letter, one of the first things you'll do is you'll get a link to a series of recordings, which is a training on the presence mantra. And the first recording walks you through the presence mantra. The second recording is 5 minutes just describing all the qualities of breath. And the next one is 5 minutes just on all the qualities of ground. Now, again, it's not to overwhelm you with all of them, but you could study breath, right? Because your breath, there's the inhale, there's the exhale. Is it in my left lung? Is it in my right lung? Am I breathing with my nose or my mouth? What's the rhythm of my breathing? All of these qualities matter. And the more familiar I get with them, just like how overwhelming was it when you tried to learn how to drive? But now you just drive, right? So I think it can be like that. But I'll just point out there's a little bit of a training on each of the elements that's available. Is there more? Do you want to follow up?
I didn't get the question. I didn't get the question.
Oh, I just asked if you wanted to follow up anything else based on what I said.
No, I appreciate it. I can
Okay.
see it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. What else is here? Okay, well, I'll say a couple more things, and maybe there'll be if you're still thinking, leave one final opportunity for a question or comment. But yes, this is the first workshop of a monthly series that I'll be offering through the Substack. So in the future, you'll have to be a paid subscriber to join the workshops. And in fact, similar to those recordings I just talked about, the lineup of upcoming workshops is going to walk through each. So the next workshop is going to be on breath, and the second workshop is going to be on ground. So we're going to, over the next 6 months, flesh out in detail each one of these aspects. And it was a little bit in what we did today, but it's very much, again, my aim that this isn't just an embodiment class, but this is something that I can take into daily life, that we're talking about, you know, how do I find my breath when that person's in the room or something like that, right? So we want to make this really like about life. That's the idea. So the monthly membership is also going to have a lot of features of other content, which is not these live calls, but if you look at my Substack, you'll see there's a series called Embodied Musicality, where I teach some brief movement practices that are more along the lines of usually something you can do anytime or anywhere. There's the imaginal musicality practices, where I provide some music and a suggestion of how to explore through movement, but a series of movements that are sort of connected to the energy or the poetry of that particular song. There's a new series that I'm going to be creating called Experimental Self-Inquiry, which will basically, it's designed to be more like giving you a framework, but to give you more of a sense of improvisation, a framework to do an inquiry that is typically quite an embodied inquiry, but it might involve reflection or different things. That's something I'll be developing. I'm going to be putting out plenty of content that's still free and available to all subscribers, but there is going to be special content here. And the basic subscription is $17 a month. So if nothing else, you can have a workshop like this for $17 a month, but you can have a bunch of other stuff. A yearly subscription is $150. But because I am launching right now, if you want to get a year subscription before September 1st, it'll be half that price. It'll be $75. So if you basically like to sign up for workshops like this for the next year for $75, which is nothing, you can do that between now and September 1st. And of course, it'd be lovely if you told your friends, if you thought this was something valuable that other people should do. Please do so. I will be putting this recording out and I will have all that information. But if you just go to Substack, I'm pulling up a link for you, but if you go to Substack, any one of my posts, the way Substack organizes it, there'll be a little subscriber button there. And if you're already subscribed for a free subscription, then you can upgrade to a paid subscription. And it's a pretty basic thing, but I'll just drop in the chat. That's where the Substack is. Oh, someone's asking if the workshop is almost over. It is almost over. But as I was saying, I will be posting the recording on the Substack. So that's the basic deal about what's happening from here on out. I'm excited that it's a new thing, and I will be able to kind of do some experiments in the way that I teach. Is there audio content on the Substack? There will be some audio content. Again, if you look at the content that's there now, like an embodied musicality, there's 5 different embodied musicality practices that are on my Substack right now, but 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. That's going to be for paid subscribers. So, and as people do, I may put out some cool things on the free Substack from time to time so people get a sense of what's in the membership. But I'm inviting people, you know, who really want to study and who are interested in this idea of an anytime, anywhere practice, because that's always going to be emphasized in the way that I do it, you know, as distinct from you take a yoga class and you go on Tuesdays to yoga or whatever. That's the specific thing that this is about. So yeah, maybe we could end on a different note than just talking about subscriptions and memberships and etc. I'd love to hear any last words, or if there's a final question. I don't mind going a little over, and of course, if you have to leave, feel free to go. But last thoughts from anyone, you can also put them in the chat. Final questions. Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, my encouragement to you, if you happen to have time on your Sunday, would be to take a walk outside and take the presence mantra with you. Just go outside. The world is more alive usually than your living room. And just go out there, experience cars honking, birds singing, people walking around, or maybe you're in a quieter place, but the world is alive, right? And you're part of the world. So again, these 5 relationships could be an invitation into a sense of connection, sense of musicality, a way of diminishing the feeling of separation, perhaps. And you're also, you know, be wonderful if you go and do that and you have any cool experience. You can come back when I post the recording, which I'll probably do today or tomorrow. Leave comments. The recording will be available, so you can tell friends to watch the recording if you think they'd like it. But we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, Seth. Thank you.